After so many years apart, the millionaire decides to reunite with the woman he once loved. But what she reveals during that visit shatters his heart into pieces. Daniel was the kind of guy people didn't really notice. He wasn't loud, didn't dress flashy, didn't drive anything special. He had this beat-up grey truck that rattled every time he turned the key, and a backpack that was always falling apart no matter how many times he stitched it. He worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, one at a local grocery store stocking shelves overnight, and another hauling junk for a small moving company run by an old man who never smiled. Daniel didn't care. He wasn't doing it to impress anyone. He was just trying to survive and take care of his mum, who had been sick for years. The thing about Daniel, though, is that despite everything going against him, he had this way of smiling that made you stop and wonder if he knew something the rest of us didn't. Like maybe he'd seen just enough good in the world to still believe in it. And the reason for that smile more than anything was Emily. Emily was sunshine. That's really the only word that fit her. She had this bright, genuine energy that made people want to talk to her, even strangers. She'd laugh at the smallest things. Her laugh wasn't polite or fake. It was loud, real, and made you want to laugh too, even if you didn't know what was funny. She came from a family that had money, the kind of money that makes you think the rules don't apply to you. Her mum, Victoria, was all sharp looks and cold smiles. And her dad, Tom, was the quiet type who never seemed to care much about anything unless it had something to do with golf or real estate. Nobody would have guessed Emily would fall for someone like Daniel, but she did. They met one afternoon when her car broke down in front of the grocery store where Daniel was clocking out. She was frustrated, kicking at the tire, trying to call her dad who wasn't picking up. Daniel noticed, offered to help, and 10 minutes later had her back on the road. She thanked him with this huge smile, and instead of driving off, she asked if he wanted to grab coffee sometime. He blinked like he hadn't expected someone like her to ask that, but he said yes. After that, they were inseparable. They didn't have much in common on paper. She had gone to college, traveled, had friends with trust funds and beach houses. Daniel barely made rent, but none of that seemed to matter to them. They'd meet at the lake after her classes or his shifts. Sometimes they'd sit in his truck for hours with the windows down, talking about nothing and everything. He told her about how he wanted to one day open his own mechanic shop, maybe take care of his mum full-time. She talked about how she wanted to get away from her parents' control and do something that mattered. They made each other feel real, safe, alive. Of course, not everyone was happy about it. Victoria found out first. She saw a photo on Emily's phone, the two of them laughing in front of a food truck. Daniel with grease on his hands and Emily leaning into him like she belonged there. Victoria didn't say anything at first. She waited. Then, one evening, she invited Daniel over for dinner. Said she wanted to get to know the boy who made her daughter smile so much. Daniel showed up nervous, wearing his cleanest shirt, hair combed back, holding flowers. Emily was so proud. She held his hand as they walked up the steps of the huge white house with pillars and a front door big enough to belong to a hotel. Inside, it was all polished wood floors, spotless white walls, and the kind of silence that made you feel like you didn't belong unless you knew how to walk a certain way. Dinner started polite. Victoria asked him about his work. When he said he worked nights and weekends to help his mum, her smile tightened. She offered him wine, then raised her eyebrow when he said he didn't drink. Emily kept trying to steer the conversation, but it didn't help. Then came the moment. Victoria set her glass down and looked him straight in the eye. "Daniel, I'm sure you're a nice young man, and I have no doubt you care about my daughter, but let's not play games. You don't belong in her world. Whatever this is between you two, it needs to end." Daniel blinked, stunned, but didn't say anything right away. Emily jumped in, furious, telling her mother to stop, but Victoria didn't stop. She went on, saying things like, "He has nothing to offer you, and do you really want to throw your future away for someone who doesn't even have a degree?" Daniel stood up, not angrily, just quietly. He looked at Emily, then back at Victoria. "I'm sorry for coming," he said. "I won't bother you again." Emily ran after him, heart racing. She grabbed his arm outside and begged him not to listen to her mum. Daniel looked like he was trying to stay strong, but his voice cracked when he said, "She's right, Em. I don't belong here, but I'm going to change that." "What are you saying?" she whispered. "I'm saying I'm leaving," he told her, brushing her hair back gently. "Not because I'm giving up, but because I'm going to make something of myself. And when I come back, your mum won't be able to say a damn thing." Emily's face crumpled. She clung to him, sobbing. "Don't go. Please. Just stay. We'll figure it out." Daniel shook his head slowly. "If I stay, I'll always be the guy your mum thinks isn't good enough. But if I go, if I do this right, I can come back and ask you to marry me without feeling like I'm taking something I didn't earn." She cried harder, holding onto his shirt like she could stop him from disappearing. He kissed her forehead, told her he loved her, and walked away without looking back. Emily stood there in the cold, arms wrapped around herself, watching the man she loved vanish into the night with nothing but a promise. She didn't know if he'd ever come back, and he didn't know if she'd still be there waiting when he did. But that night, a promise was made, and everything changed. The first few weeks after Daniel left were the hardest. He had never been that far from home before, never gone a day without seeing Emily, hearing her laugh, or getting one of her late-night texts that always started with, "Are you awake?" and ended with, "I miss you." Now all he had was silence. His phone was old and barely worked, so he relied on letters. Real, handwritten letters that smelled like the paper from the grocery store where he used to work. He'd sit at a small desk in the corner of the tiny apartment he shared with 2 other guys and write about everything. How he got a job on a construction crew. How the city felt so different. How much he missed her. He poured everything into those pages. Sometimes he'd even draw little hearts at the bottom just to make her smile when she saw them. He mailed the first letter the same week he arrived. Then another the week after. He imagined Emily reading them, maybe crying a little, maybe keeping them in a box somewhere. But days turned into weeks, and there was no reply. At first, he told himself maybe the mail was slow, or maybe she was busy, but after a month he started worrying. He wrote again, this time shorter, saying he just wanted to know she was okay. Still nothing. Emily, meanwhile, woke up every morning hoping to see an envelope with his handwriting on it. She used to check the mailbox before breakfast, pretending she was just grabbing the paper so her mum wouldn't notice. But it was always empty. She tried to convince herself that maybe the letters hadn't arrived yet. She didn't want to believe that Daniel could just disappear without saying goodbye. She knew him better than that. Victoria, though, had other plans. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. She was in the living room when the mailman handed her a small pile of envelopes. Bills, invitations, and one that stood out, Daniel's messy handwriting. The name Emily written across it like a secret meant for someone else. Victoria looked at it for a long time before opening it. She didn't even hesitate. She read every word, her face twisting with anger and something close to disgust. Then she tore the letter in half and threw it into the fireplace. When the next one arrived, she didn't even open it. She just threw it away. Then another came, and another. She started collecting them in a small drawer before burning them all at once on Sundays when no one was home. It became her quiet ritual, destroying every piece of him before it could reach her daughter. In her mind, she wasn't being cruel. She told herself she was protecting Emily from wasting her life on a man who would never belong in their world. Emily noticed something was off. Every time she asked the mailman if there was anything for her, he'd shrug. Sometimes he'd say, "Nothing today, maybe tomorrow." After 2 months, she started writing her own letters. She sent them to the return address Daniel had written once on a napkin the day he left. She told him she missed him, that she was proud of him, that she was counting the days until he came back. She even drew a small heart next to her name. But just like his letters, hers never got a reply. Daniel checked his mailbox every evening after work. It was a tiny box at the end of the hallway, always stuffed with flyers and random junk. Every time he opened it, he hoped for a letter with her handwriting, the one he knew so well, but it was always empty. After a while, he stopped checking every day, then every week, then barely at all. The city was rough on him. He worked long hours carrying heavy materials, eating cheap food, sleeping little. There were nights when his hands shook from exhaustion, but he still sat down to write. Sometimes the letters were full of hope, other times they were just him trying to hold on. "I don't know if these are reaching you," he wrote in one, "but I'll keep writing anyway, because it feels like talking to you." Back home, Emily's father, Tom, tried to stay out of it. He didn't agree with Victoria's harshness, but he also didn't stop her. He thought maybe it was for the best. Maybe Daniel would move on. Maybe Emily would too. But he underestimated how strong that love had been. Emily didn't move on. She waited. Every birthday, every holiday, every late night when she couldn't sleep, she'd sit by the window and think about him. One afternoon, she went to the post office herself, hoping maybe something had been misplaced. The clerk looked at her with sympathy. "Sorry, ma'am, there's nothing under that name." She smiled weakly, thanked him, and walked out with her chest feeling hollow. That night, she sat in her room holding the necklace Daniel had given her, a simple silver chain with a tiny charm shaped like a star. She whispered to it like it could carry her words to him. "Please don't forget me." Meanwhile, Daniel's life kept changing. He got promoted to foreman, saved a little money, and rented a small place of his own. But no matter how hard he worked, how many new people he met, nothing filled the hole left by the silence. He'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if maybe her family had convinced her to forget him. Sometimes he thought about going back, just showing up at her door. But every time something stopped him. The fear that maybe she'd moved on, maybe she'd chosen the life her parents wanted. After a while, he stopped writing letters altogether. The last one he sent was short. "I still love you," it said. "But I don't know if you want me to anymore." He never got an answer. Months later, Victoria opened another letter she hadn't expected. It was thinner this time, and something about it made her pause. She opened it and read it slowly, her hand trembling just slightly. It wasn't full of love or hope like the others. It was just one page. Daniel wrote that he was done writing, that he understood now what she had tried to tell him at that dinner table, that he would make something of himself, not for Emily's family's approval, but for himself. "When I come back," the letter ended, "you'll remember my name." Victoria folded it carefully and put it away instead of burning it. She didn't know why. Maybe because something in those words unsettled her. Maybe because a small part of her believed he would actually do it. Back in his small apartment, Daniel sealed away the memory of that love like a wound he couldn't afford to reopen. He stopped checking the mail. He stopped talking about Emily. But deep down, under all the exhaustion and silence, the promise still lived. It was the thing that kept him standing when everything else felt like it was falling apart. He just didn't know that, on the other side of that silence, she was still waiting, believing he'd come back, even when everyone told her he never would. The first winter in that new city was brutal. Cold wind cut through Daniel's worn-out jacket like it wasn't even there. His fingers would go numb during early shifts, and his boots were so thin he could feel the concrete through the soles. He didn't complain though, he just worked. It didn't matter how tired he was or how little he slept. If there was work to do, he showed up and did it. The other guys on the crew noticed. They didn't say much, but they started trusting him more, giving him extra hours when they could. The job wasn't glamorous. He spent most days carrying buckets of cement, lifting heavy beams, or scraping dried glue off dusty floors. It tore up his hands. At night, when he finally got back to his small shared apartment, he'd sit on the floor next to his mattress, slowly peeling off his boots while trying not to wake his roommates. Then he'd just sit there in the dark, trying to breathe through the pain in his back and the burning in his chest that came from thinking about Emily. He didn't have her voice anymore, or her letters, or any updates about how she was doing, but he still had the necklace she gave him. He kept it inside his wallet, tucked into a small torn part of the lining. Every once in a while, when things got really bad, he'd take it out and just hold it for a few seconds. It didn't fix anything, but it reminded him why he was doing this. One morning, after a freezing night where the pipes had burst in the apartment and the heat stopped working, Daniel reached his limit. He stood in the middle of the tiny kitchen with frost on the windows and water on the floor and asked himself out loud, "What am I doing?" He didn't mean it like he wanted to quit. He meant it like, something has to change. Surviving wasn't enough anymore. He didn't come all this way just to barely make it. That week, he started asking around at different job sites. Most people ignored him or told him there was nothing available. Then one afternoon, he helped an older man who was struggling to lift a tool chest into the back of a truck. The guy turned out to be Mike, a small-time real estate guy who flipped houses and did his own repairs. Mike noticed Daniel's strength and quiet work ethic and offered him a trial gig, clearing out a junk-filled house for a few $100. Daniel said yes before the guy even finished explaining. The job was disgusting. The house was full of trash, broken furniture, mold, and things Daniel would rather not talk about. But he got it done, faster than Mike expected. And when Mike came back to check the place, he nodded once and said, "You got hustle. I like that. You want more work?" That was how it started. Daniel became Mike's right-hand guy. He helped clean, repair, paint, gut, and rebuild old homes. It wasn't glamorous either, but it was different. It felt like something. He started learning things just by watching, how to estimate renovation costs, how to spot a bad foundation, how to negotiate with people who didn't want to sell until the price was right. Mike was rough around the edges, but honest. And for the first time, someone was treating Daniel like he had a future, not just as free labor. But not everything went smoothly. A few months into working with Mike, one of their bigger flips went sideways. A pipe burst in the middle of the night, destroying most of the new drywall they'd installed. Daniel had helped pay for some of the supplies out of his own savings, the little bit he'd managed to hold on to. and now it was gone. He stood there staring at the wet, sagging mess and felt something in his chest twist tight. Mike was pissed but didn't blame him. "This is part of it," he said, lighting a cigarette with shaky hands. "Sometimes you lose more than you make. That's just how it goes." Daniel didn't say anything. He just nodded and got to work. He stayed up all night ripping out what was ruined, hauling it into a dumpster by himself. He didn't sleep that night. He didn't even go home. He just stayed and fixed everything he could. The next morning, when Mike came back and saw what Daniel had done, he didn't say much. He just handed him a cup of coffee and said, "You're not just some kid looking for a paycheck. You're the kind that makes something out of nothing. You ever think about doing this on your own?" Daniel didn't answer right away, but the idea stuck in his head. After that, everything changed. He started saving more aggressively, spending late nights reading about real estate investing, watching videos on how to run a business, and figuring out how to get a license. He ate cheap, wore the same clothes, and never went out. Every dollar went into a folder labeled someday. He wasn't chasing money for the sake of it. It was about that promise. About being a man worthy of the life he wanted with Emily. The life he still believed in, even if she was gone. One day, he finally found a small place in a rough neighborhood. It was falling apart, and cheap enough that no one else wanted it. He emptied his savings and bought it under his name. That night, he stood in the middle of the dark living room, surrounded by broken walls and rotting carpet, and smiled for the first time in months. He owned something. It wasn't much, but it was his. He worked on that house for months, fixing it during the day, working with Mike on other jobs in the evening. Sometimes he'd pass out with paint on his face or sawdust in his hair. But slowly, room by room, the place changed. By the time it was done, it didn't look fancy, but it looked like something you could be proud of. He sold it for a small profit. Not a huge one, but enough to buy a second property, then a third. Years passed like that. One day, someone asked him if he ever thought about hiring help. That's when he realized he had become the guy people came to for advice. The guy who signed checks instead of just cashing them. He had a team now. People respected him. Clients trusted him. And he wasn't just surviving anymore. He was building. Still, every night when he went home, it was quiet. No one waiting for him. No laugh echoing down the hall. Just that necklace, still in his wallet. Just her memory. And that promise. He told himself he'd go back when he was ready. When he had enough to look her family in the eye. When the man he was matched, the man he wanted to be for her. That time was getting close. He could feel it. He just didn't know what he was walking back into. Emily had stopped smiling the way she used to. It wasn't sudden. It happened slowly, like a light dimming over time. At first, nobody really noticed. Not her friends, not her parents, not even herself. But then came the mornings when she didn't bother doing her hair. The days when her phone would buzz and she'd just let it ring. The way she stopped singing to herself when she got ready. The way she'd stare at her plate during dinner like she wasn't even there. She never talked about Daniel anymore. It hurt too much. And the silence from him had grown heavier than she could carry. At night, she'd lie awake and wonder if he was happy or if he ever thought about her. Maybe he'd moved on. Maybe her mum was right. Maybe it was better this way. Those thoughts didn't comfort her. They just made the ache deeper. Victoria, on the other hand, had been waiting for the right moment. It came one Sunday afternoon during a family lunch when she casually brought up Scott Whitman. "You remember Scott, don't you?" she asked with that fake sweet tone Emily had grown to hate. "His parents just joined the club again. Apparently he's working in finance now. Very successful." Emily didn't answer. She just kept pushing the mashed potatoes around on her plate. But it didn't stop there. A few days later, Victoria set her up, claimed they were going to a fundraiser, and then casually mentioned Scott would be there too. Emily rolled her eyes but went along, mostly to avoid another argument. She hadn't seen Scott in years. They'd gone to school together. He was the type of guy everyone assumed would end up rich and important, always dressed nice, always had something slick to say. At the fundraiser, he walked up to her with a grin that hadn't changed since high school. "Emily Sanders, still the prettiest girl in the room," he said. She forced a smile and said hi. She tried to keep the conversation short, but Scott wasn't the type to take hints. He stuck around talking like they were old friends catching up. He complimented her dress, asked what she'd been up to. She gave short answers, mostly out of politeness. After that, he kept showing up. At first, she thought it was coincidence. Then it became clear he was making an effort, or someone was arranging it. Flowers started showing up at the house with his name on the card. Texts started coming in. Invitations to dinners, events, little weekend trips. Emily didn't reply to most of them, but Victoria did. Every time Emily said no, her mum pushed harder. He's a good man, Emily. He comes from a respectable family. He could give you a good life. He actually wants to be with you. That one stung the most. Like a knife hidden behind a compliment. Emily started to snap. You act like I'm some burden you need to marry off. I'm not a problem to fix. Victoria sighed and crossed her arms. I'm just trying to help you move on. He's not coming back, Emily. You need to stop living in a fantasy. That night, Emily cried in the shower for almost an hour. She pressed her face into a towel and screamed until her throat hurt. But she never let anyone see her break. Not even Claire. Claire was the only person still on her side. Her younger sister didn't say much, but she watched. She saw how Emily shrank around their mum, how she avoided eye contact when someone mentioned Daniel's name. Claire started digging, quietly. Something about the whole thing felt off to her, but she didn't have proof. Not yet. Then came the dinner that changed everything. Victoria invited Scott and his parents over for a family gathering. Emily didn't want to go, but Victoria insisted, told her to wear something nice. Said this dinner was important. Emily showed up late, wearing the same black dress she always wore when she didn't care about trying anymore. The moment she walked in, she knew something was wrong. The way everyone smiled too wide. The way her father stood up like he'd been rehearsing something. And then, in the middle of dinner, Scott stood up, took out a ring box, and got down on one knee. Emily, I've always had a thing for you. You're beautiful, kind, smart, everything I've ever wanted. I know we haven't had much time together recently, but I believe we're meant to be. Say yes. Be with me. The room went silent. Everyone was looking at her. Emily froze. Her mind was racing. Her chest was tight. Her hands started to shake. She felt like she couldn't breathe. Victoria leaned forward slightly, smiling. Say yes, sweetheart. Emily stood up without saying a word. She looked around the room at the faces waiting for her to fall in line. Then she turned and walked out the front door, barefoot, leaving her shoes under the table. Scott texted her later that night, a long message about how maybe she was overwhelmed, how he understood if she needed time, how he'd wait. She didn't answer. Victoria came into her room without knocking. You embarrassed all of us, she said coldly. Emily didn't look at her. She was sitting by the window, holding her phone, still waiting for a message that would never come. I didn't ask him to propose, she said quietly. Victoria scoffed. But you knew it was coming. No, Emily whispered. I didn't. And even if I did, I wouldn't have said yes. Well, you're going to, because you're not throwing your life away for a man who left you. He's gone, Emily. Stop waiting for him. Emily stood up and faced her mother, tears running down her cheeks. You don't get to decide who I love. Victoria's voice didn't rise, but it was sharp. And you don't get to shame this family. After that, things got colder at home. Emily tried to keep her distance. She started spending more time at the library, at coffee shops, anywhere she could be alone. She didn't speak to Scott, but the pressure didn't stop. Victoria kept reminding her that her options were running out, that she wasn't getting any younger, that Scott wouldn't wait forever. Claire saw everything. And one afternoon, while helping Victoria clean the upstairs office, she saw something strange. A drawer, locked tight, with a small key hidden under a vase. She waited until the house was empty and unlocked it. Inside were burned edges of old envelopes, names half visible. One in particular, Emily Sanders in handwriting Claire didn't recognize, but somehow felt familiar. She took one of the less damaged ones and hid it in her pocket. That night, she sat on the floor of her room with a flashlight and carefully opened the torn envelope. Inside was a letter, a real one, from Daniel. And suddenly, everything made sense. Claire had never gone through her mum's stuff before. She didn't even know what made her do it that day. Maybe it was the tension in the house. Maybe it was how quiet Emily had gotten again after the proposal disaster. Or maybe it was just a gut feeling that something wasn't right. She found the drawer purely by accident. Victoria had left the upstairs office door open, which was rare. Claire had been helping her dust shelves and organize old photo albums when her mum was called away to take a phone call. Claire was left alone for just a few minutes. That's all it took. There was something off about that drawer. Not just the fact that it was locked. It was the way Victoria had slid the key into her pocket before walking out, like she knew someone might try to get in. That tiny move stuck in Claire's mind. After dinner, while everyone was busy pretending to be normal, Claire snuck back upstairs. She'd remembered seeing her mum hide a small silver key under the fake bottom of the crystal vase on her desk before. She didn't think much of it back then, but now it made sense. She reached under the vase and sure enough, There it was. She didn't know what she expected to find. Maybe old checks, property papers, stuff like that. What she didn't expect were letters. Dozens of them. Some torn, others crumpled. A few barely opened. All addressed to Emily. All from the same person. Claire's heart started pounding as she flipped through them. The handwriting looked rushed and emotional, like the writer had poured everything into the page. She pulled one out carefully, smoothing it across her lap. It started with, "I hope this reaches you." The signature at the bottom read Daniel. Her stomach flipped. She scanned the words, barely breathing. It wasn't just a letter, it was all of it. The pain, the hope, the love, the confusion. Daniel had never stopped writing. He hadn't abandoned Emily. Claire's first thought was, "Oh my God, my mum did this." She sat frozen on the floor for a long time. All the weird things started lining up. Emily's quiet heartbreak, the way their mum always said, he left, but never let her talk about it. The way she'd pushed Scott on her like she was racing against time. It was a lie. All of it. Claire wanted to scream, but she didn't. She couldn't. Not yet. The next morning, she waited until she and Emily were alone. They were in the kitchen. Claire was making toast and Emily was sipping tea, staring out the window like she always did lately. Claire slid the letter across the table without saying anything. Emily blinked. "What's this?" "Just read it." Emily looked confused but opened it slowly. The second her eyes hit the page, her breath caught. Her hand flew to her mouth. She read the whole thing in silence, then read it again, slower this time, like she was trying to make sure it was real. When she finally looked up, her eyes were filled with tears. "Where did you get this?" Claire's throat tightened. "Mum kept them. She hid them in her office." Emily stared at her, stunned. "Are you serious?" "I found more," Claire said. "Like 20, maybe more. Some of them are half burned. I think she was destroying them." Emily covered her face with both hands. Her shoulders started shaking. She didn't cry loudly, but the pain in her was clear. It wasn't just heartbreak anymore, it was betrayal, deep and personal. Claire sat next to her, wrapping her arms around her tightly. "You didn't do anything wrong," she whispered. "You've been blaming yourself this whole time, but he never stopped loving you." She lied. She kept you from the truth. Emily just kept whispering, "It didn't leave me. He didn't leave me," over and over again, like she couldn't believe it. Claire stayed with her the whole day. They didn't say much. They just sat on the couch with the letters spread around them like pieces of something broken that maybe, just maybe, could be put back together. By night, Emily had stopped crying. Now she was angry. Not the explosive kind of angry, the quiet kind, the dangerous kind. "I want to find him," she said suddenly. Claire nodded. "I'll help you." They tried everything that night. Searched online. Looked through old emails, social media, even old photos for clues. Daniel had disappeared. No Facebook, no Instagram. Nothing recent came up in a Google search. Just some old posts about a job he'd had years ago. "He's like a ghost," Emily muttered. But Claire didn't give up. There's always something. You don't just vanish. The next day, while Emily was at work, Claire made a few quiet calls. She started with Daniel's old job, the grocery store. They didn't have records from that far back. Then she called the moving company he used to work for. Still nothing. Finally, she took a wild shot and called an old friend of his that she vaguely remembered, Kyle, a guy who used to hang around with Daniel sometimes. She found him on Facebook and messaged him. To her surprise, he answered. "Yeah, I remember Daniel," Kyle replied. "He left town. Said he was going to make something of himself. Haven't heard from him in years." Claire pushed. "Do you know where he went?" Kyle sent back one word. Detroit. That was all they needed. When Emily got home, Claire was already pulling up addresses for contractors and construction companies in Detroit. If he went there, and he was working in construction or real estate, he probably got licensed, Claire said. "Let's check public records." It took hours, but they found it. Daniel Carter, owner of Carter Renovations and Investments. There was a photo attached to an article. Daniel in a suit, cutting a ribbon in front of a newly flipped house, smiling. He looked older, stronger, different, but still him. Emily broke down again, but this time, it was relief. She traced his face on the screen with her finger. "He really did it," she whispered. "He really kept his promise." Claire smiled even through her own tears. "I told you he never gave up on you, and now you're not giving up either." That night, they didn't sleep. They stayed up making a plan. Emily didn't want to write. She wanted to go, to see him face to face, to look him in the eyes and ask him why he never came back. Even though now, deep down, she already knew. Victoria had built a wall between them, but Claire had just helped knock it down. The rest? That part was up to Emily. Daniel had been back for 3 days before anyone even knew. No press, no family visits, no stopping by old spots to announce his return. He just drove into town in a black SUV with tinted windows and parked across from the same park where he and Emily used to sit for hours doing nothing but talking and pretending the world didn't exist. He didn't get out right away. He just sat there, hands on the wheel, eyes locked on the swings, swaying in the wind like they were still waiting for them. The town looked smaller, not physically, but emotionally. Like the version of him that once lived here had been stuck in a cage, and now, coming back with everything he'd built, that cage felt too tight, too quiet, too fake. The streets were the same, but the people seemed more faded. Or maybe he had just seen too much since he left. He wore a plain black hoodie and jeans. No fancy watches, no loud brands, nothing that screamed money. He didn't want to be noticed. Not yet. He just needed to breathe the air, to feel the ground under his feet, to see if anything still felt real. The first time he stepped out of the SUV and onto that sidewalk, he felt it. The weight of 5 years. It didn't hit like a movie moment, all slow motion and music. It hit like a quiet ache in the chest, the kind that sneaks up on you when you're not sure if you're scared or excited or just plain tired. He walked through the park the next morning, sat on the same bench they used to claim as theirs. He stayed there for 2 hours, waiting. Not for Emily, he knew that was too much to hope for, but maybe for the universe to send him a sign. All he got was a squirrel stealing someone's leftover sandwich and 2 joggers arguing over earbuds. But he kept coming back. Day 2, day 3, same bench, same time, same silence. He didn't even know what he expected. Maybe some strange part of him thought Emily might walk by, or that someone who knew her would. He wasn't ready to go to her house. Not yet. He wasn't ready to face Victoria either. That woman's voice still echoed in his head sometimes, with all her condescending little phrases and fake smiles. He had no idea that Emily had already found him. While he sat on that bench in the park, she sat at her bedroom window, staring at her phone, holding the screenshot of his photo from the article Claire had shown her. He was here, in the same town, breathing the same air, and she hadn't seen him yet. She thought about going to the park, too. Just walking in like it was any other day and casually bumping into him. But what if he didn't want to see her? What if he had changed too much? What if he wasn't here for her at all? Claire pushed her. You need to stop thinking and just go. If you don't, you'll regret it. But Emily hesitated. The truth was, part of her was scared. Not just of seeing him again, but of everything she'd feel when she did. What if he looked at her like she was a stranger? What if he had someone else? What if he had moved on and she was still frozen in time, stuck in the version of the world where he promised to come back? Daniel, on the other hand, had made up his mind. He wasn't just here to visit. He had unfinished business. On the 4th day, he put on a collared shirt, cleaned up his beard, and drove to the Sanders family estate. He hadn't been there since the night he left. The night Victoria had made it crystal clear that he was nothing in her eyes. The place hadn't changed. The white pillars still stood tall. The lawn still looked like a golf course. It was quiet, expensive, and cold. He parked across the street and stared at the house. Then he turned off the engine, got out, walked to the front door. Every step felt heavy, like his shoes were made of cement. But he didn't stop. He rang the doorbell and waited. It wasn't Emily who answered, it was Claire. She opened the door, blinked, and nearly dropped the cup of water in her hand. Daniel, she said, barely above a whisper. He looked at her, surprised. Claire, you're tall. She let out a shaky laugh and then suddenly launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck like it had only been weeks instead of years. You came back, she said. I promised, he answered. Just like that. They stepped inside quickly, before anyone else saw. Claire led him to the back room and closed the door. Emily doesn't know you're here, she said, her voice buzzing with emotion. She's been going crazy. She wanted to find you first, but didn't know how. We didn't even think you'd come back on your own. Daniel sat down, his head spinning. I didn't know if she'd want to see me. I didn't even know if she waited. Claire nodded fast. She did. She never stopped. He ran a hand over his face. I kept writing. For months. Then I thought maybe I was the only one still holding on. She never got the letters, Claire said quickly. Mum, burned them. Hid them. All of them. Daniel didn't even react at first. He just stared at the floor, jaw tight. Of course she did, he said finally. That woman would burn the whole world down if it didn't fit her plan. Claire looked at him, full of something like guilt. I should have known. I should have figured it out sooner. No, Daniel said. This wasn't on you. Then Claire did something bold. She stood up, grabbed her phone, and dialed Emily. Daniel's heart started racing. Claire said, "Hey, can you come home? I need to show you something." Emily asked something on the other end. Claire just said, "Please. It's important." When she hung up, she looked at Daniel with wide eyes. "She's on her way." He nodded slowly. "Okay, you should wait outside," Claire added. "By the tree. The big one near the driveway." That's where she parked. Daniel walked out, trying to steady his hands. Every part of him felt like it was on fire. He stood by the tree, heart pounding, staring down the road. Minutes passed. Then he saw the silver car turning the corner. He could see her silhouette behind the wheel. The car slowed, pulled into the driveway, stopped. The door opened, and there she was. Emily stepped out, the wind tugging gently at her hair. Her eyes locked on his before she even shut the car door. Neither of them moved. They just stood there, staring, both of them frozen like they were afraid the other would vanish. Then Emily took a step, and Daniel did too, until finally they were face to face. She looked up at him with tears in her eyes, trying to say something, but the words got caught in her throat. He opened his mouth, then closed it. For a moment they just stood there, breathing the same air, heartbeats crashing in silence. Then he whispered, "I never stopped loving you," and she broke. Emily didn't speak right away. She was trying, but her mouth wouldn't work. The tears had started falling the second Daniel said those words. Not the kind of crying where you sob loudly. It was quiet, shaky, almost like her whole body didn't know how to handle what she was feeling. Daniel looked just as messed up. His chest was rising and falling like he'd just run a mile, but he hadn't moved an inch since they got face to face. His hands were balled into fists, like he was afraid if he reached for her, she'd disappear again. The silence between them was full of everything they'd wanted to say for 5 years, but couldn't. Finally, Emily let out a soft, broken laugh and wiped her face. "You're really here," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Daniel nodded. "I wanted to come sooner. I didn't know if he stopped himself. I thought maybe you didn't want to see me." Emily shook her head quickly. "I thought you left. I thought you just moved on." "Never moved on," he said. "I couldn't." She took a step closer, like her body didn't care what her mind was trying to figure out. Her eyes scanned his face, slowly, like she was making sure it was real, and not some dream that would disappear the second she blinked too long. He looked older, stronger, more put together, but his eyes were exactly the same, and that's what broke her all over again. "I waited for you," she said. "I waited even when everyone told me to stop." He breathed in sharply, like those words physically hit him. "I kept writing. Every week at first, then every few weeks. Then I stopped because it felt like I was writing into a black hole." "She never gave me a single letter," Emily said. "Not one. She told me you were gone, that you'd found someone else." Daniel's jaw clenched. "I knew she didn't like me, but I didn't think she'd go that far." "I should have known," Emily whispered, her voice cracking again. "I should have fought harder." "No," Daniel said, stepping closer now too. "This isn't on you. I left. I thought it was the right thing. I thought if I came back with something to offer, it would be enough." Her voice dropped. "It was always enough, Daniel." They were inches apart now. Neither one knew if they should hug or cry or just stay frozen forever. Then she reached out and touched his face, gently, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to. But he leaned into it, eyes closing for a second, like he'd been waiting for that moment longer than anything. "I missed you every day," she said. "Even when I hated you, even when I thought you forgot me." Daniel let out a quiet laugh, half broken, half full of something like relief. "I didn't forget a single thing about you." She dropped her hand. "Why didn't you come back sooner?" "I was scared," he admitted. "I built this whole life around the idea that I'd come back when I was finally worth it. And then I started thinking, what if by the time I got back, you were already gone? What if I did all this and it was too late?" She looked at him, eyes shining with tears. "You idiot." He let out another shaky laugh. "Yeah." Then she finally wrapped her arms around him, and the moment she did, he buried his face into her neck, like he hadn't been able to breathe right for years. They didn't say anything. They just stood there holding each other, shaking, crying, feeling the pieces of something broken trying to fit back together. Claire watched from the window, wiping her own tears away. She didn't want to interrupt. She just wanted to witness it. When they finally let go, Emily looked up at him with a look that was all heart. "What happens now?" Daniel shook his head slowly. "I don't know. I didn't think this far ahead. I just knew I had to see you." She smiled softly. "Well, you saw me. So you're not getting rid of me now." He laughed, more fully this time. "Good." They walked around the backyard like two people who didn't want to leave each other's side. The air felt lighter now, like the weight had shifted somewhere else. They sat down on the old bench near the garden, the one their mum kept clean for appearances. Emily leaned into him, her head on his shoulder, like she was finally letting herself be okay again. He told her about the city, about starting over from nothing, about the nights he went to bed on the floor, hungry, thinking about her. He told her about flipping that first house, about how scared he was to spend everything he had on something so uncertain. He told her about how every single thing he did, every brick he laid, every dollar he saved was to keep a promise, even if he thought no one was on the other side of it anymore. Emily told him about Scott, about her mum, about the way her hope kept shrinking a little more each year, but how it never totally disappeared. She told him how she found out about the letters, about Claire, about the night she cried herself to sleep with one of his half-burned envelopes clutched in her hand. They didn't need to explain how they felt anymore. The looks, the pauses, the quiet smiles, it all spoke louder than words ever could. Eventually, the sky started turning orange. Claire came outside, holding 2 glasses of lemonade like it was the most normal thing in the world. She handed one to Daniel and said, "Took you long enough." He grinned at her. "I owe you big time," she shrugged. "Yeah, you do." The 3 of them sat together for a while, the way families should, without all the fake smiles and polite lies. At some point, Victoria pulled up the driveway. Emily saw her car first and stood up. "I should tell her," she said. "She's going to lose it." Daniel nodded. "You sure you're ready for that?" Emily took a breath. "Yeah, this time I'm not backing down." Victoria stepped out of the car, heels clicking against the pavement, sunglasses still on like she was shielding herself from more than just sunlight. She froze the moment she saw Daniel. Her lips tightened, her shoulders stiffened. "Hello, Victoria," Daniel said calmly. She looked him up and down like she was trying to see if the man standing in front of her was real. Emily stood beside him and grabbed his hand. "I love him," she said, "and I'm not hiding it anymore." Victoria didn't respond. Not yet. She just stood there, lips parted, speechless. And for the first time in a very long time, Emily wasn't afraid of her mother anymore. Victoria stood there like she was staring at a ghost. She didn't move, didn't blink. Her jaw was tight. Her mouth pulled in that same sharp line it always formed whenever she didn't like what she saw. Except this time, what she was looking at wasn't a dirty old truck or a boy with scraped hands. This time it was Daniel, clean-cut, confident, dressed in a way she couldn't pick apart. And Emily, standing beside him, holding his hand like she had no intention of letting go. The silence was brutal. Claire shifted awkwardly on the steps behind them, like she was ready to jump in if things went south. Emily didn't wait for her mother to say anything. She stepped forward, holding her ground. "We need to talk," she said, calm but firm. Victoria finally removed her sunglasses and placed them in her purse with this slow, deliberate motion like she was buying time. "I can see that." Emily nodded once. Inside. Victoria turned without another word and walked up the steps into the house. Emily followed her. Daniel glanced back at Claire. She gave him a tiny nod. "You good?" he asked. Claire smiled a little. "Better now." Daniel stepped into the house behind Emily. Everything looked the same. Same spotless floors. Same expensive furniture no one ever used. Same perfect kitchen that smelled like lemons and rules. But it didn't feel the same. The air was heavier now, colder. Victoria was already standing near the fireplace like she always did when she wanted to feel in control of the room. Emily didn't let her have that. "I know about the letters," she said. No hello, no lead up. Just straight to it. Victoria's face didn't change. "I figured that out when I saw his face outside." "You burned them," Emily said. "You kept them from me. I protected you." Emily laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "From what?" "From loving someone who actually gave a damn about me." "I protected your future," Victoria said, louder now. "You think dragging him back into your life after all this time is going to fix something? What happens when this fantasy wears off and you're stuck with a man who can't live in your world?" Daniel stepped forward. "You don't know a damn thing about my world." Victoria turned her eyes on him like knives. "I know enough." He stayed calm. "Do you? Do you know what it's like to sleep on a mattress on the floor while working 2 jobs and still not being able to afford a bus ride? Do you know what it's like to watch someone you love suffer and not have the money to get her the medicine she needs?" Victoria didn't answer. Daniel kept going. "Do you know what it's like to build something from scratch when all you've got is your hands and a reason not to give up?" Emily looked at him like her heart was about to burst. Victoria folded her arms. "So now you're proud of being poor?" "I'm proud I didn't let it define me," he said. "I left because I wasn't ready, because I didn't want to come back with empty hands and promises I couldn't keep." "And what?" Now you think money changes everything, she snapped. Daniel looked at her, dead in the eyes. No. But it changes your excuses. That shut her up for a second. Emily stepped between them. This isn't about money, or status, or what house someone grew up in. This is about the fact that you lied to me. You stole time from me. I did what I had to do, Victoria said, suddenly quieter. No, Emily said. You did what you wanted. You didn't even ask me how I felt. You just decided you knew better, and you destroyed something that actually mattered. I was afraid, Victoria said, almost too quietly to hear. Emily's voice cracked. Of what? Of me being happy? Of you being left behind, her mother said. Of you ending up like I did, giving up everything for someone who couldn't give it back. That made everyone pause. Daniel looked at her. What are you talking about? Victoria walked to the bar and poured herself a glass of water. Her hands were shaking just a little. I met someone before Tom, she said. Someone I loved more than anything. He didn't come from money, he didn't have connections. But I followed my heart, and I lost everything. My parents cut me off, friends turned their backs, and in the end, he left anyway. No goodbye, no reason, just gone. And I was alone. I had to rebuild from nothing. Emily softened for just a second. So, you let that fear ruin mine? Victoria didn't answer. She stared down at her glass like it held the rest of the truth she wasn't ready to say. Emily stepped closer. You had no right to take that from me. Daniel didn't leave me. You pushed him away. I didn't think he'd come back, Victoria said. Well, he did, Emily said. And this time, I'm not letting you send him away. Victoria looked at them both, her daughter and the man she tried so hard to erase, and something cracked, not loudly, not all at once, but in her eyes. For the first time in years, she looked tired, not physically, emotionally, like carrying that control had worn her down. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said, but I did what I thought was right. Emily shook her head. That's the thing, Mum, you never asked what I thought was right. The room went still again. Daniel gently reached for Emily's hand. She held onto it without hesitation. Victoria didn't say anything else. She walked past them slowly, like the weight of the whole conversation had finally settled into her shoulders. She climbed the stairs without looking back. The door to her bedroom clicked shut. Emily turned to Daniel, letting out a breath she didn't know she was holding. That's the first time I've ever stood up to her like that, she said. Daniel smiled. You were amazing. I feel like I just went 10 rounds in a boxing ring. You won. Emily laughed, leaning her head against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her. They stood there for a while, not needing to say anything, just feeling each other, real and solid and here. Then Claire peeked in from the hallway. Is it over? She whispered. Emily smiled. For now. Claire grinned. Good, because dinner's getting cold. They all laughed. And just like that, something shifted. Not everything was fixed. Not yet. But something heavy had finally been dragged into the light. And once something's out in the open, it can't hide anymore. Daniel didn't rush it. He could have proposed the second Emily took him back. Part of him wanted to. But he didn't want the moment to be about proving anything. He wanted it to be real, with no pressure, no fear, and no one watching over their shoulders. So for a few days, he just stayed close. They had breakfast together for the first time in forever. They drove around town, pointing out old spots and laughing at the memories like no time had passed. They even went back to the gas station where they used to grab cheap coffee at midnight just so they could sit in the car and talk. It felt strange how easily they fell back into their rhythm, like their hearts never actually unlearned each other. Claire gave them space but stayed close too. She had Daniel's back now, fully and completely, like a quiet little bodyguard who knew all the pressure points in their mother's armor. And while Victoria hadn't said much since that confrontation, the house had definitely changed. Less ice in the air, less control, more silence, but not the tense kind. The kind that made it clear that maybe, just maybe, she was thinking about things she'd spent years avoiding. But none of that mattered to Daniel right now. He was planning something. The ring wasn't huge, and he didn't buy it from one of those fancy jewelers with velvet trays and fake smiles. He'd had it custom made. Simple gold band, small round diamond, and inside he had it engraved with 2 words, for always. It wasn't about how much it cost, it was about what it meant. He kept the ring in his jacket pocket for a full day before he had the guts to use it. The whole time, he walked around like he had a secret burning a hole in his chest. He almost did it when they were parked by the lake, watching the water ripple as the sun set. He almost did it when she laughed at something stupid he said and leaned her head on his shoulder. He almost did it when she kissed him and whispered, I never stopped loving you. Like it was the most natural sentence in the world. But it didn't feel right. Not yet. He waited until Sunday. The town held a small outdoor market every weekend in the same park where he and Emily had shared so many late afternoons. Food trucks, handmade stuff, local musicians playing acoustic sets under the trees. They hadn't been back there together since he returned. So when he asked if she wanted to go, she lit up and said yes instantly. It was warm out. That perfect kind of fall where the sun still gives you enough heat, but the wind reminds you change is coming. Daniel wore jeans and a navy shirt. Emily wore this flowy white dress with tiny blue flowers, and her hair was down. She looked like the version of herself he used to dream about when he was laying on a hard mattress in another city, trying to fall asleep with nothing but memory. They walked hand in hand through the market, trying mini donuts and fresh lemonade. They stopped at a booth selling second-hand books, and joked about how Daniel still hadn't read anything past high school level. They took a photo in front of the food trucks, both of them laughing so hard it came out blurry. He saved it anyway. And then, when the music started, some local guys singing a slow version of a love song they used to listen to, Daniel knew. This was it. Right here, right now. He asked her to walk with him, just a little bit away from the crowd, toward the tree where they had carved their initials all those years ago. The carving was still there, faded, but clear enough to see. E+D. She ran her fingers across it and smiled. I can't believe this is still here, she said. I can, he said, his voice soft. She turned to look at him, and that's when he dropped to one knee. No big speech, no crowd, no cameras. Just them. She gasped and covered her mouth instantly. Her whole body froze, but her eyes filled with tears almost immediately. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out the small box. His hands were shaking slightly, but his voice was steady. I know there's been a lot between us. Time, distance, pain, lies. But I never stopped loving you. I never stopped hoping that one day I'd be back right here, standing in front of you. You waited for me, and I'm standing here because of that. He opened the box. I don't want to waste another second. Emily Sanders, will you marry me? She didn't speak right away. She was crying too hard to get the words out, but she nodded, fast, over and over. Yes, she finally choked out. Yes, yes, yes. He stood, and she threw her arms around him so tight he almost dropped the ring. They were both crying and laughing at the same time, just like they had back when they first fell in love. He slid the ring onto her finger, and she stared at it like it was the most beautiful thing in the world, not because it was shiny, but because it meant them. People nearby started clapping when they realized what had just happened. A few cheered. A lady even wiped her eyes and whispered, God, I love young love. Emily and Daniel didn't care about the audience. They were in their own bubble. They stayed wrapped up in each other for a while under that tree, talking about everything and nothing, the way they used to. When they finally walked back toward the market, hand in hand, Emily kept looking down at the ring like she couldn't believe it was real. Do you know how long I dreamed about this? She asked. Daniel smiled. Probably not as long as I have. Claire was waiting for them near the coffee stand. The second she saw Emily's hand, she squealed, nearly tackled her with a hug, then turned and punched Daniel lightly in the arm. Took you long enough, he grinned. Thanks for holding the line. Just don't screw it up, she teased. I won't. That night, they went back to Daniel's place. It wasn't huge, but it was his. Clean, warm, with real furniture he'd picked out himself. Emily walked through every room like she was learning a new side of him. The side he built when she wasn't around. She curled up with him on the couch, her head on his chest, his hand resting over hers. I don't want a big wedding, she said. Good, he said, because I don't want anything but you. And for the first time in a long, long time, everything felt right. The morning after the proposal, Emily woke up before Daniel. She was lying in his bed, head resting on his chest, the soft hum of his breathing steady and warm. For a second, she didn't move. She just stared at the ceiling with a little smile, turning her hand back and forth to watch the ring catch the sunlight through the blinds. It sparkled, but not in a flashy way. It just felt right. She hadn't felt that way in a long time. Daniel stirred a few minutes later, blinked the sleep out of his eyes, and looked down at her. Morning, he whispered, voice still rough from sleep. Morning, fiancé, she whispered back, teasing, her face half hiding in the blanket. He smiled like a goof, pulled her closer and said, damn, I like how that sounds. Later that afternoon, they went to Claire's place to talk through the first steps. Claire was already one step ahead. She had a notebook, a laptop open, and had even printed out a checklist from some wedding website she found online. I know you said small, she said, flipping through the pages, but you still have to plan a small wedding. Emily laughed. Do I at least get to wear jeans if we keep it simple? Daniel shrugged. Only if I can wear boots. Claire rolled her eyes. You two are ridiculous. But even with the jokes, the truth was, Emily wanted it to be beautiful. Not big, not over the top, but something they'd never forget. Something real. Something that felt like them. They picked a date that was only 2 months away. They didn't want to wait. There had already been enough waiting. Life had already stolen years. They weren't giving it a single day more. They chose a local vineyard just outside town. It wasn't fancy in the traditional sense, but it had this quiet charm, with rows of trees, wide open skies, and a small barn that could be decorated with lights and flowers. It felt peaceful, honest, homey. Daniel looked around during their tour and said, "This is where I want to see you walk toward me." Emily blinked back tears. Claire booked the venue on the spot. For a few days it was perfect. They met with a caterer who offered them a discount after hearing their story. A friend of Daniel's offered to do the music for free. Emily found a dress at a small boutique in the city, a simple one with lace sleeves and a long soft train. No diamonds, no stiff bodices, just something that flowed when she walked. And then came the part Emily had been dreading, telling her mother. They hadn't really spoken since the day Daniel showed up at the house. Not really. Victoria had avoided the topic like it didn't exist. She made vague comments like, "We'll talk about it later," or "if that's really what you want." But when Emily and Daniel officially told her they were getting married with a date, a location, and everything moving forward, the real Victoria came out. She didn't yell, she didn't scream, but the words she said were like ice water poured down Emily's back. "So you're actually going through with it?" Emily stayed calm. "Yes, we are." Victoria narrowed her eyes. "You're rushing into this because of emotions. You haven't thought it through." Emily crossed her arms. "We've had 5 years to think it through. And you're telling me you want to throw your entire future away for someone who built his own company?" Emily cut in. "Who kept his word? Who came back for me?" "Yeah, that's exactly who I'm marrying." Victoria's expression didn't crack. She just said, "Then don't expect my help." Emily blinked. "I'm not asking for it. You'll regret cutting me out of this. I'm not cutting you out. You're walking out." The tension in the room was sharp enough to slice through. Victoria picked up her wine glass, walked to the window, and stared out like she couldn't believe this was happening. "I suppose you'll invite Claire too," she said bitterly. "Claire's my maid of honor." Victoria's eyes flicked with something like offense. "You didn't even ask me." "You're not the one standing by me, Mum," Emily said softly. "Not anymore." Later, when she got back to Daniel's place, she didn't cry. She just kicked off her shoes, walked into the kitchen, and leaned against the counter with her arms folded tight. "She's not coming," she said. Daniel looked up from his laptop. "I figured," Emily nodded, trying to keep her voice even. "I don't even know if I care anymore." He got up, crossed the room, and pulled her into a hug without saying a word. She held on longer than she meant to. "She's going to miss the best day of my life," she whispered. "She's missing you," Daniel said. Still, the next few weeks flew by. They picked flowers, wild ones, nothing too styled. They made a playlist of songs that actually meant something instead of some generic wedding music. Claire helped with invitations, even designing them herself. And Daniel worked behind the scenes making a surprise video for Emily with clips from people they hadn't seen in years. Friends, old co-workers, even his mum, who was now healthy and smiling on camera, saying, "You're the best thing that ever happened to my boy." Emily cried when she saw it. The night before the wedding, Daniel couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything. The pain, the waiting, the fear. He thought about the old version of himself, broke, tired, invisible, and how that guy would have never believed this was real. His phone buzzed. It was Emily. "Can't sleep? Want to talk?" He smiled and called her. They talked until the sun came up. Not about big things, just life and stupid memories, and who was going to cry first when she walked down the aisle. Emily said, "I'm not even nervous. Isn't that weird?" Daniel replied, "I'm terrified, but in the best way." She laughed softly. "Tomorrow everything changes," he answered. "No, tomorrow everything starts." It was 5 days before the wedding when the quiet started to feel suspicious. Everything was just too calm. No new arguments, no snide comments, no weird texts from Victoria. Nothing. It was like she had disappeared. Emily hadn't heard from her mum since their last talk, not even a word about the wedding. "She's probably just sulking," Claire had said, scrolling through cake photos with Emily on the couch. "Let her stay in her little ice palace. We're busy building something real." Emily tried to agree, but something didn't sit right. Her mum was a lot of things. Cold, stubborn, controlling, but she was never silent. If she was quiet, she was planning. And Emily was right. The first sign of trouble came from Daniel's old friend Nate, who still lived in the area. He called Daniel out of nowhere one night and said, "Man, have you seen this?" Daniel was in the kitchen trying to figure out how many chairs they'd need for the outdoor ceremony. He looked at his phone and asked, "Seen what?" "Just look online." Daniel opened his laptop, pulled up the local news site, and there it was. Headline, "Self-made millionaire or former brawler?" He clicked the article. His chest tightened. There was a grainy photo from 7 years ago. Daniel standing outside a bar, bloody lip, torn shirt, being pushed into the back of a cop car. The headline spun the story like he was dangerous. The article mentioned his business success, sure, but focused hard on that one arrest from back when he got jumped trying to defend a coworker. It didn't talk about how the charges were dropped. It didn't say anything about context. Just painted a picture of a young, hot-headed man with a dark past. And the worst part, the article mentioned his upcoming wedding. It didn't say Emily's name, but it didn't have to. The comment section was full of hints, gossip, and strangers asking, "Is this the guy marrying her?" Daniel sat there, frozen for a minute. Then he stood up, grabbed his keys, and drove straight to Emily's house. She was already outside when he pulled in. Claire had shown her the article too. "Who did this?" Emily asked, face pale. Daniel didn't answer right away. He was still too stunned, still trying to process that something he'd put behind him, something so far in the past, was being used to paint him as someone he wasn't. Emily's eyes narrowed. It was her. Claire looked up from her phone. "You really think she'd go that far?" Daniel finally spoke. "She's the only one who knew enough to make it happen, and who had a reason to." Emily was already walking back inside. She didn't slam the door, but the sound of it shutting behind her was loud enough. Daniel followed her in, watching her grab her phone off the counter. She stared at it for a second, then called her mum. It rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. Emily didn't leave a message. She hung up and called again. This time, straight to voicemail. Daniel sat down on the edge of the couch. "She's trying to embarrass me. She wants people talking. She wants you to panic." Emily stayed quiet. Daniel rubbed his hands over his face. "I didn't even get charged. It was one night. I was a dumb kid who tried to help a friend and ended up getting arrested because I didn't run away fast enough." "You don't have to explain it," Emily said. "I already know who you are." But her voice was shaky, and he noticed. Later that night, Claire sent a screenshot to Daniel. It was from a private Facebook group Victoria was a part of, a local one for the old money families in town. Someone had posted the article. The caption said, "Interesting how much you can hide behind a nice suit these days." Daniel stared at the message, then deleted it. He didn't want to fight fire with fire, but Emily, she wasn't letting it go. The next day, she drove straight to her parents' house. Victoria wasn't expecting her. She opened the door with this blank expression like nothing was wrong. "You did it," Emily said. "No hello, no pretending." "I don't know what you're talking about," Victoria replied, turning to walk back into the kitchen. "You planted that story. You fed them old information. You used Dad's connections. I know how this works." Victoria poured herself tea like she hadn't just been caught. "I simply told someone to look into who you were marrying. The rest is public record." Emily's hands were shaking. "Why? Why would you do this? What are you trying to prove?" "That I still care," Victoria said calmly. Emily blinked. "This is caring? He's not who you think he is." "He's exactly who I think he is," Emily snapped. "He came back. He's worked for everything he has. He didn't buy it. He built it. You think I care about one mistake from years ago? I've seen what he's made of." Victoria didn't flinch. "People talk, Emily. Reputation matters. You care more about what strangers think than about what makes me happy." "That's not true." Emily stepped closer. "You tried to ruin his name to stop this wedding. What's next? You gonna show up an object during the vows?" Victoria looked away. Emily stared at her mother like she didn't recognize her anymore. "You're not stopping this. I love him. We're getting married. And you can either be there and sit down like everyone else, or you can stay home and wonder what it's like to watch your daughter be happy without you." She left without another word. Daniel was sitting on the porch when she pulled up. She walked up, dropped her purse on the steps, and sat beside him. "She did it," she said, voice flat. I told her she's not stopping this." He turned his head. "Are you sure?" Emily looked at him, eyes full of something stronger than anger, something settled. "I've never been more sure of anything." Daniel nodded slowly. "All right then." They sat there in silence, listening to the wind rustle the leaves. Then Emily whispered, "I hate that she's making us feel like this on what's supposed to be the happiest week of our lives." Daniel reached over and took her hand. "She's not anymore. From here on out, it's just you and me." The day after the article stopped circulating, people moved on. Another scandal. Another story. Daniel didn't respond. He didn't post statements. Didn't defend himself in public. He just kept showing up at the florist, at the vineyard, at Emily's side, building the life he said he would. And Victoria? She didn't apologize. But for the first time, she didn't show up to stir things again. She stayed quiet. Maybe because she realized she'd played her last card and lost. Daniel hadn't slept much the night before. It wasn't because of the wedding checklist or the rehearsal dinner Claire kept reorganizing for the 10th time. It wasn't even about Victoria or the article anymore. It was something deeper, heavier, something that had been sitting in his chest like a weight, slowly pressing harder the closer the wedding got. He was scared. Not of marrying Emily. That part was easy. That part was already done in his heart. He was scared of failing her. The closer the big day got, the louder the thoughts became. What if I mess this up? What if I'm not enough? What if she deserves better than someone who had to climb his way out of the dirt just to stand next to her? He didn't talk to anyone about it. Not even Emily. She was glowing, happy, laughing with Claire, doing final dress fittings and making playlists with her childhood best friend who'd flown in from college. Daniel didn't want to ruin that, so he smiled when he had to. He helped where he could, but inside he was spinning. It all came crashing down at the rehearsal dinner. The vineyard looked perfect. Tables were set. Lights were strung up along the fence. The smell of barbecue and wildflowers filled the air. Everyone was dressed casually, but nice. Friends and family sat around laughing, passing around drinks and hugging people they hadn't seen in years. Emily was in a light blue dress, hair curled loosely. She looked stunning, like someone out of a memory Daniel never wanted to lose. And then came the toast. Claire stood up first. She said some sweet things, talked about watching Emily grow up, about how Daniel came back when no one thought he would, and about how love, when it's real, stays. People clapped. Emily teared up. Daniel smiled and kissed the top of her head. Then someone else stood up. An old friend of Tom's. Some guy Daniel didn't know personally but had seen around growing up. Rich, smug, half drunk. He raised his glass and said, "Let's hear it for the man of the hour." I'll admit, I didn't see this coming. Daniel Carter, from stock boy to real estate rock star. Some awkward laughs. The guy kept going. I mean, hell, I remember when this kid used to carry bags to my car, and now he's marrying Emily Sanders. I guess anything's possible, huh? More laughter. This time a little more uncomfortable. Daniel froze. The guy didn't mean to be cruel. He thought he was being funny, but his voice had that edge, the one Daniel had heard 100 times growing up. That tone people used when they were pretending to compliment you while really reminding you where you came from. The silence after the toast was awkward. Daniel forced a smile, raised his glass politely, and sat back down. But he wasn't okay. Later, while everyone mingled and wandered around the vineyard, Emily found him standing near the fence, staring out at the trees like they might give him an answer. She walked up behind him. He didn't turn around. She touched his arm gently. "You good?" He let out a breath. "Dunno." She moved in closer. "Talk to me." He looked at her then, really looked at her. And what came out of his mouth next wasn't planned. "I don't know if I belong here." Emily's eyebrows pulled together. "What?" He looked away. This world, these people, the suits, the wine glasses, the perfect photos. I feel like I'm pretending. Like I'm crashing a party I wasn't invited to. She took a step back, caught off guard. Where is this coming from? That guy tonight. The way he talked about me. Like I'm some project. A joke that happened to make money. Daniel, that's his problem. "No," he said, voice sharper now. "It's not just him. It's all of it. Every time I walk into a room with you, I feel people looking at me like they're waiting for me to screw up. Like they're thinking, he's lucky she picked him. And maybe I am lucky. But that doesn't mean I'm not tired of feeling like I'm not enough." Emily's face changed. Hurt. Confused. Angry. "So, what are you saying?" she asked. "That you want to call it off?" "No," he said quickly. "God, no. That's not what I'm saying. I don't want you waking up one day and wondering what you gave up to be with me." She crossed her arms. "Don't do that. Don't act like this is all one-sided. Like I just settled for you. You think I haven't had to explain to people over and over why this matters? Why you matter? I didn't mean it like that. But that's what it feels like," she snapped. "Like you're trying to pull away before something goes wrong." Daniel looked down, voice low. "Because I'm scared." Emily's voice dropped too. "I am too. But being scared doesn't mean you run." They stood in silence. The night around them moved on. Laughter in the background, music playing softly, people clinking glasses. But between them it felt still. like everything was hanging in the balance. Finally, Daniel spoke. I spent 5 years thinking about how I'd get back to you. I built everything with this picture in my head. You, waiting for me, and me walking back into your life with something real. I thought once I had the money, the business, the success, I'd feel different. Like I finally deserved you. But I still feel like that kid sleeping on a mattress with no sheets. Emily stepped forward, placed her hands on his chest. You don't have to deserve me, Daniel. You already love me. That's enough. He looked into her eyes. I don't want to be the reason you lose the people in your life. She smiled, soft and sad. I already lost the people who didn't love me for who I really am. I'm not losing you too. He exhaled. I'm sorry. She shook her head. No more apologies. Just stay. He nodded, pulled her into his arms, held her like he was afraid to let go again. And in that quiet moment, under the stars, with the vineyard lights glowing and the weight of old fears still clinging to them, they didn't fix everything, but they chose each other. Again. Scott had been quiet for a while. Too quiet. After Emily broke off the engagement, he didn't make a scene. Didn't blow up her phone. Didn't beg. He just vanished. And for a guy like Scott, the type who was always the center of the room, always in control, that silence should have been a red flag. But Emily had too much going on to think about him. She figured maybe he'd finally accepted it was over. He hadn't. What Scott did was wait. He watched. He let her little fairy tale with Daniel play out. The stories, the proposal, the wedding plans. He saw it all unfold online. People tagged him in posts without realizing, little reminders of what he'd lost. And each time he saw Daniel's name, that old bitterness inside him cracked open wider. It wasn't just that Emily had left him. It was who she left him for. To him, Daniel was still that broke kid from the edge of town. And Scott had spent years believing guys like that didn't get girls like Emily. Not in the real world. Not when guys like him were raised to win. But he didn't win. And the more he stewed in that fact, the darker his thoughts got. Scott started asking around. He wasn't stupid. He knew how to keep things quiet. He didn't go around shouting about revenge, but he dropped questions. Subtle stuff. Found a guy who used to know Daniel back in the day. Found another guy who once worked with him on a job site years ago. People always talk, especially when they think they're talking to someone important. Scott gathered whatever he could. Small pieces, stories, names. Most of it was nothing. But one night he heard something that stuck. A guy at a bar mentioned how Daniel had been in a fight once. Said he got arrested for it. Said there was a video floating around somewhere, but it had never made the news. Scott's mind lit up. This was it. He knew the article Victoria leaked didn't land the way she wanted. People moved on too fast. But a video? That could change things. He paid a guy to find it. 2 days later, he had it. The footage was rough, dark, grainy, but clear enough to make out Daniel throwing a punch in a parking lot. A few others around him, shouting, blood, cops. It looked bad. And it didn't come with context. It didn't show the part where Daniel had stepped in to protect a guy being attacked. It didn't show the first swing that wasn't his. It just showed fists, sirens, and cuffs. Scott smiled. He waited until 2 days before the wedding to make his move. Daniel and Emily were out at the vineyard doing a final walkthrough. Claire was helping set up the seating chart. The weather was perfect, spirits were high, and everything felt almost too good to be true. Then Emily's phone buzzed. An unknown number. No name. She almost ignored it, but then it buzzed again. Unknown number. Congrats on the wedding. Just thought you should see this before you say I do. Attached was a link. She clicked it. Her stomach dropped. It took all of 10 seconds for her heart to start racing. The video wasn't long, maybe 30 seconds, but it was enough. She watched Daniel throw a punch, watched another guy hit the ground, watched cops swarm in and drag him away. It looped automatically, and with each replay, her head filled with more questions. Where did this come from? Why hadn't Daniel told her? Why now? She didn't say anything to Claire, just walked away from the setup and called Daniel. He picked up on the second ring. Hey babe, what's up? Her voice was flat. Where were you the night of April 18th, 2018? There was a long pause. Why are you asking me that? Just answer. He sighed. I don't know the date, but if you're talking about the night I got arrested outside that bar, yeah. I was there. Why? I just saw a video. Another pause. Longer this time. She heard him breathe. Heard the regret. The weight. I was trying to protect someone, he said quietly. A guy I worked with. Got jumped by 2 drunk guys. I stepped in. I didn't start it, but I definitely finished it. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't think it mattered. It was years ago. Charges got dropped. It never even made the news. Well, it matters now, she said, voice sharp. Daniel didn't defend himself. Who sent it? No name, just a number. Scott, he said immediately. It has to be. Emily was quiet. You believe me, right? He asked. She hesitated. I want to. That pause between them cracked something. Later that night, Daniel showed up at her house. Claire let him in. Emily was in her room, sitting on the edge of the bed, phone still in her hand. The video paused on Daniel's face in mid-swing. He sat down across from her. I messed up, he said. It's not because of the fight, but because I didn't tell you. I should have been honest from the start. She nodded slowly. Yeah, you should have. I wasn't trying to hide it. I just didn't want to ruin what we had with something that was behind me, something that didn't define me anymore. Emily stared at him. But it still is part of you. Daniel didn't argue. I know. I'm not mad about the fight. I'm mad that someone else showed it to me before you did. He reached for her hand. You still want to marry me? She looked at him, eyes tired but still soft. I didn't say no. Claire stepped into the room with her phone in her hand. I found the number, she said. It's Scott. He's been calling around asking about Daniel for weeks. He sent the video to at least 3 other people. I think he wants it to go viral. Daniel leaned back. Of course he does. Emily stood up. We're not letting him ruin this. Daniel looked up at her. Even with the video out? She nodded. We're getting married. And anyone who wants to judge you based on 30 seconds of your worst night can stay the hell away from our wedding. Daniel stood too. I don't care if the whole town sees it. I only care about one person. Emily stepped closer, her voice steady now. You have me, but you have to promise. No more secrets. No matter how ugly. No more protecting me by keeping things from me. I'm not fragile. He pulled her into his arms. I promise. Claire smiled from the doorway. Okay, now that we've had our daily dose of emotional trauma, can we get back to planning the most dramatic wedding this town's ever seen? Emily laughed through her tears. Let's do it. And just like that, they moved forward, with eyes wide open. Emily didn't want revenge. She wasn't that kind of person. She didn't go around trying to destroy people just because they hurt her. But this time, it was different. This wasn't just some breakup. Scott had tried to ruin Daniel's life, again. And worse than that, he did it knowing exactly what it would do to her, too. She was done being quiet about it. The morning after the video surfaced, Claire sat down at the kitchen table with her laptop and said, I think we can nail him. Emily looked up from her tea. What do you mean? Claire spun the laptop around. I've been tracking his messages. You know, I still have a few friends who work in IT, right? One of them owed me a favor. Turns out, Scott sent that video from a burner number, but it was linked to his actual phone through a cloud account he forgot to disconnect. Emily leaned in, her chest tight. You're serious? Claire clicked a few folders open. There are messages, screenshots, notes where he's literally planning this. He even joked about leaking it on the morning of the wedding. Emily didn't speak for a second. Then she stood up. We're showing this to Daniel. Daniel met them later that afternoon, sitting across from them with that quiet look he got whenever he was trying not to let anger get the better of him. Claire slid the laptop toward him. He read everything. When he finished, he leaned back slowly and said, Wow. He wanted to destroy you, Emily said. And he was so sure no one would stop him. Daniel nodded. He probably thought I'd walk away. Claire crossed her arms. Or that you'd lash out to make yourself look worse. Emily looked at him. But we're not letting him win. Daniel was quiet for a second. Then he asked, What do you want to do? Emily didn't hesitate. I want to expose him. Publicly. Let people know the truth. Claire added, We have proof. It's not just gossip. Daniel looked at both of them and smiled a little. Then let's do it. The next day, Claire sent the screenshots to a local reporter she trusted, a young woman named Megan who'd always been fair in her writing. She didn't sensationalize things or chase drama, but she did care about the truth. It took 1 hour for Megan to call back. I want to talk to all 3 of you, she said. I want to get the full story. Daniel was nervous at first. So was Emily. But when they sat down with Megan the next afternoon, everything came out. The letters that were never delivered. The years of silence. The proposal. Victoria's interference. The article. And now the video Scott tried to use as a final blow. Megan didn't interrupt much. She just listened. Took notes. And when Daniel explained what really happened that night outside the bar, how he'd stepped in to stop 2 drunk guys from beating someone half to death, how the charges were dropped, how no one ever told the full story, Megan just nodded. I believe you, she said. And I'll make sure the truth gets told. The article went live the next morning. The full story. From silence to sabotage. The truth about Daniel Carter. It was everywhere within hours. The comments were completely different this time. People apologized, said they judged too quickly, said Daniel had every right to be angry. A few even called him a hero for stepping in that night. The clip that Scott tried to use to tear him down was now being seen for what it really was. A moment where Daniel did the right thing and got punished for it. But the best part wasn't the article. It was the fact that Scott couldn't hide anymore. Within a day, his messages were leaked online. The fake accounts he used, the texts he sent bragging about what he was going to do, it all got out. And suddenly, he was the one answering for everything. People unfollowed him. The law firm, where he worked quietly, distanced themselves. Emily's old family friends, the ones who always whispered behind her back, started whispering about him instead. Daniel didn't gloat. He didn't post a thing. Didn't say a word on social media. He didn't need to. The truth had spoken for itself. That night, Victoria called. Emily saw her name on the screen and hesitated, but then she picked up. Hello? There was silence for a second. Then Victoria's voice, soft and stiff. I saw the article. Emily didn't say anything. I didn't know it went that far, Victoria added. Yes, you did, Emily said. You just didn't care. Not until everyone else did. More silence. Then quietly, I'm sorry. Emily took a breath. You don't have to say it because it's public now. Say it if you mean it. Another pause. Then I do. Emily didn't answer. She wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. But she didn't hang up either. After she ended the call, she looked at Daniel. He was sitting on the floor with his back against the wall, staring at nothing. You okay? She asked. He looked up and gave a small, tired smile. I think I am. They didn't celebrate. Not like people expected them to. No champagne, no speeches, no party. They just sat on the couch that night in sweats, eating leftover takeout, her feet in his lap, a blanket across them. It felt like peace. Real peace. Emily scrolled through the article again, pausing at a picture of Daniel. The new one, not the fight clip. He was smiling in it, standing outside one of the homes he'd rebuilt. A man who came back for everything that mattered. She turned to him. You know what this means, right? He looked at her. We can finally breathe. Daniel reached for her hand, and for once, no one was trying to pull them apart. The vineyard was quiet the night before the wedding. No more vendors. No last-minute details. Everything was set. The chairs were lined up under the trees, soft lights already strung overhead. The barn had been cleaned and cleared out for the dinner. It all looked perfect. Too perfect. Daniel stood there alone, hands in his pockets, staring at the ceremony space like it was some kind of final test. He should have been excited. Everyone expected him to be. But his stomach felt tight, and his mind wouldn't stop racing. He knew it wasn't about Emily. He loved her. That was the easy part. It had always been the easy part. It was about everything else. He kept thinking about the fight, the article, the video, all of it. The way it had almost derailed everything. And yeah, they got through it, but it left this scar, this quiet voice in the back of his head asking if maybe he was still that same kid, the one who fought to be seen, the one who didn't belong in places like this. What if he let her down? What if he couldn't keep up? What if all of this, the business, the house, the wedding, was just a version of success that could slip out of his hands the second he blinked? He heard footsteps behind him. It was Claire. Thought I might find you here, she said. Daniel didn't look at her. You think it's too late to run? She smiled, but it was soft. Depends. Are you running towards something or away from it? Daniel sighed. I don't know. Claire sat down on one of the folding chairs, hugging her knees. You want to talk about it? He hesitated, then finally sat down beside her. I love her. I really do, he said. But I can't shake this feeling like I'm faking it. Like I don't actually belong in the life we're building. Claire looked over at him. You think she picked the wrong guy? Daniel nodded once. Sometimes. Claire took a breath. You ever stop and thinking maybe you're the one who hasn't caught up to the man you've become? He frowned. What do you mean? I mean, you've done all this work, built all this stuff, faced all this crap, and you still look at yourself like you're that broke kid with nothing to offer. But you're not that guy anymore, Daniel. He didn't answer right away. Just sat there, letting it sink in. Claire leaned over. You know what Emily told me last week? What? She said, when I'm with him, I feel safe. Not because he has money or answers, but because he listens. He shows up. He never lets me feel alone. Daniel looked at the grass. She said that? Claire smiled. Yeah. So maybe stop worrying about what you're not, and start trusting what you are. Daniel didn't cry, but he came close. Later that night, he sat in his truck, parked outside the house he and Emily were going to move into after the wedding. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that gets inside your chest and makes everything feel a little too big. He picked up his phone, thought about texting her, thought about saying something like, what if we're not ready, or what if this goes wrong? But he didn't want to put that weight on her the night before everything. So instead, he just typed, "Are you awake?" A few seconds later, she replied, "Can't sleep." "You?" "Same. Want to come over?" He didn't hesitate. Emily was in sweats when she opened the door, her hair pulled back, eyes tired but warm. Daniel stepped inside, and the second she closed the door behind him, he blurted it out. "I'm scared." Emily didn't react the way he expected. She didn't freeze or back away or tell him to get over it. She just walked up to him, slowly, and wrapped her arms around his waist. "Me too," she whispered. Daniel's arms slid around her shoulders. "I thought I was supposed to be the brave one." "You've been brave for 5 years straight," she said. "You're allowed to be scared now." They stood like that for a while. Then she pulled back and looked up at him. "Tell me what's in your head." He took a breath. "What if I mess this up? What if all of this, us, is too good for me?" Emily's face softened and she reached up to touch his cheek. "You think I picked you because you're perfect?" she asked. "I don't know. Maybe I hoped I'd be close." She shook her head. "I picked you because you make me feel like I can breathe. Because when the world gets loud, you're quiet. Because when I fall apart, you sit with me. Because you don't try to fix me. You just love me." Daniel looked at her, the fear still there, but a little less sharp. Emily kept going. "If you're scared, that's fine. But don't let fear make decisions for you. Not now. Not when we've come this far." He nodded slowly. "Okay," she smiled. "Okay." He leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Yeah, okay." She pulled him into the living room, and they curled up under a blanket on the couch. No big conversations, no dramatic confessions, just quiet, steady closeness. At one point, Emily whispered, "I'm probably gonna cry tomorrow. Just so you know." Daniel smiled into her hair. "Me too." She laughed. "You better not make an ugly cry face during the vows." No promises. When they both started to drift off, Emily mumbled, half asleep, "I don't care if you're scared. Just show up." Daniel held her a little tighter. "I'll be there." Emily woke up before the sun came up. She laid in bed staring at the ceiling, heart pounding like she'd just run a mile. Not because she was having second thoughts. That wasn't it at all. She was sure, more sure than she'd ever been about anything, but still it was a lot. She could already hear voices downstairs. Claire, her best friend Jules, and someone from the flower crew had shown up early. She could smell coffee, hear laughter. But in her room everything was quiet, still, heavy with the kind of feeling that only shows up once in your life. She sat up slowly, took a deep breath, and said out loud, "It's today." Her voice cracked just a little. Claire burst into the room 10 minutes later with a pastry in one hand and a hair straightener in the other. "Okay, bride, it's go time. And yes, I brought the chocolate croissants you like because I'm that good." Emily laughed, hugged her, and for a moment forgot the nerves. Down the road, Daniel was sitting on the porch of his place with his best man, Nate, going through vows he had rewritten 6 times. "You want to read them to me one more time?" Nate asked. Daniel looked up. "You sure? Because I cried reading them to myself earlier." "Dude, I cried when I heard the playlist you made for the reception," Nate said, smirking. "You're allowed to be soft today. It's your wedding." Daniel laughed but wiped his eyes quickly. The day was warm. Sun shining but not too hot. The kind of weather people wish for when they plan outdoor weddings. The vineyard looked like something out of a movie, but not the glossy, overdone kind. Just beautiful in that simple, peaceful way. Rows of white chairs. Flowers that actually smelled like flowers, not chemicals. A soft breeze that made the light strewn across the trees sway just a little. Guests started arriving around noon. Emily's dad showed up alone, wearing a grey suit that didn't quite fit, but he smiled big when he saw Claire. He hugged her longer than expected and said quietly, "Thanks for standing by them." Victoria didn't show. Emily had told her she was still welcome even after everything, but deep down she didn't expect her to come, and part of her was okay with that. The woman who always wanted control wasn't going to take this moment from her. In the bridal suite, Emily stood in front of the mirror in her dress, the one she picked out without telling anyone. It was soft white, lace sleeves, low back, no sparkle, no drama, just her. Her hair was pinned back loosely, a few pieces falling around her face. Her makeup was light, no glam team. No overdone glam. Claire came in and froze. "Oh my God." Emily turned. "Too much?" Claire's eyes got glassy. "You look exactly like you. Like the real you. And he's gonna lose it." They both laughed, and Claire handed her a folded note. "He sent this. Said not to read it until 5 minutes before you walk out." Emily held it close, heart thudding all over again. Meanwhile, Daniel stood behind the barn, pacing slowly. His tie already loosened because he couldn't breathe right with it tight. Nate straightened it again anyway. "You're about to marry the girl you've loved since forever," Nate said. "No tie is going to choke you worse than that." Daniel laughed nervously. Good pep talk, you're gonna be fine. And then the music started. Not some dramatic wedding march, but a soft acoustic version of one of the songs they used to play in Daniel's truck years ago, when everything was still just a dream. The guests stood. The hush fell. Claire stepped out first, then Jules, then the little flower girl, who got distracted halfway and tried to chase a butterfly, then her. Daniel saw her before she even turned the corner, standing at the edge of the trees, holding a small bouquet of simple white and blue flowers. She looked calm, but her eyes were locked on his, like nothing else in the world existed. He blinked, and just like that, he was crying. Not sobbing, not dramatic, just quiet tears that slid down without warning. Emily smiled when she saw him, and that was it. She walked slowly, no one giving her away, no dramatic reveal. Just Emily, coming to him on her own, choosing him out loud in front of everyone. She reached the altar. He reached for her hand without thinking. She squeezed back. The officiant smiled and said, "You ready?" They both nodded. Daniel went first. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the crumpled paper he'd rewritten half a dozen times, then decided to just speak from his heart. "I don't have a perfect story," he said. "I messed up more times than I can count. I left when I thought it was the right thing, and I came back not knowing if I'd still have a place in your life. But you waited, you held on, and you never let go of us, even when I gave you every reason to. I don't deserve that kind of love, but I promise I'll spend every single day trying to be the man who does." Emily was already crying. She took a deep breath, smiled through her tears, and said, "I used to think love had to be easy, that if it was meant to be, it would all just fall into place, but I was wrong. Love takes work. It takes pain and patience and faith when you don't see the road ahead. And even after everything we went through, I still choose you, over and over. Even when it's hard, even when it hurts. I want every messy, beautiful day with you." The officiant gave them a second to breathe, then asked for the rings. Nate handed Daniel a ring box. Claire passed hers to Emily. They slipped them on. The breeze picked up, just a little. "You may kiss the bride." Daniel smiled, leaned in, and kissed her. Slow, gentle, and full of everything they never got to say over the years. The guests cheered. Some cried. Claire definitely cried. They didn't walk back down the aisle fast. They took their time. Every step meant something. Every look was full of a quiet kind of joy. Not loud, not picture perfect, but steady and real. At the reception, they danced barefoot under the lights. No first dance choreography, just swaying in each other's arms, while people they loved laughed and clinked glasses around them. At one point, Daniel whispered in her ear, "Do you still feel like this is real?" Emily smiled, forehead resting against his. More than ever. And for the first time in forever, there were no fights to win, no lies to unravel, just them, exactly where they were supposed to be. The wedding was over, but no one wanted to leave. It wasn't one of those parties where everyone gets drunk and forgets half the night. It wasn't packed with influencers or staged photos. There were no towering cakes or celebrity DJs or long speeches that made people check their watches. It was just warm lights, soft music, and people who cared enough to show up and stay late. Every chair felt full of someone who mattered. Emily had changed into a light dress after the ceremony, the kind she could actually breathe and move in, and kicked off her heels hours ago. Her hair was falling loose, and she didn't care. She looked tired and glowing at the same time, the kind of happy that makes you look more like yourself, not less. Daniel hadn't let go of her hand all night. They sat together at one of the round tables instead of some bride and groom thrones set up. No elevated platform, no giant signs with glitter. Just them, laughing with Claire and Nate, plates half filled with food. They were too distracted. Every few minutes someone would stop by, an old neighbor, a friend of Daniel's from work, Emily's college roommate, and they'd lean in for hugs and say the same thing, over and over. "This feels like love." And it did. There was a moment when Emily leaned back in her chair and just looked around. The twinkle lights were swaying a little in the breeze. People were wrapped in blankets. Kids were running through the rows of vines chasing fireflies. Nate was slow dancing with Claire, even though neither of them were saying anything about it. Daniel's mum had her arms around two people at once, laughing louder than anyone else. The music wasn't loud, just a playlist Daniel had made with songs they both loved, old and new. And Emily just whispered to herself, "We made it." Daniel heard her. He smiled and pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Yeah, we really did." They didn't have a cake-cutting moment. Someone brought out pies. People just grabbed forks and shared slices off paper plates like it was Thanksgiving. At one point, Daniel and Emily walked off to the edge of the property to catch their breath. No one followed them. They didn't say where they were going. They just needed a moment to themselves. They ended up sitting on the tailgate of Daniel's old truck, the same one he used to drive when he barely had gas money. The one with the dent on the side from when he misjudged a turn outside the grocery store. He'd kept it all these years, even after he could afford better. It was beat up and loud, but it still ran, and that meant something to him. "Do you remember the night we talked about getting married?" Emily asked, her voice soft. "Which one?" he said. "The first time? Or the time when I was too scared to say it out loud?" She smiled. "The one in the truck, after that thunderstorm. We were soaking wet, sitting on towels, and I said, if we ever get married, let's keep it simple." He laughed. "And you said no ballrooms, no choreographed dancers, no signature cocktails with names like the Daniel and Emily's blush, and no planners who call everything darling," Daniel added. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You got it exactly right." He looked at her hand in his, the ring glowing faintly in the moonlight. "I used to think I had to build a big life to be good enough for you." Emily looked up. "You did build a big life." He shook his head. "No, I built a real one. That's different. And it started with you." They sat there in silence for a while, just listening to the wind and the laughter in the distance. Neither of them wanted to leave, but the night was getting cold, and people had started grabbing their things. Claire wandered over, barefoot, carrying Emily's bouquet like a trophy. "You guys hiding from your own wedding?" she teased. Just taking a breath, Emily said. Claire sat on the ground, leaning back against the bumper. "It was beautiful. Everything. Not perfect, but exactly right." Daniel grinned. "That's how we do things." Later, after everyone had gone and only a few cars were left in the gravel lot, Emily and Daniel walked through the vineyard one last time, hand in hand. It was quiet again, peaceful, like the whole place had been waiting for them to come back to it alone. They reached the spot under the tree where they'd stood hours ago and said their vows. The same spot where, years ago, they'd carved their initials when they were just kids in love with no plan, no money, no clue what was coming. Daniel ran his fingers over the carving, faded now, but still there. "E+D, you think that version of us would believe this is real?" he asked. Emily smiled. "That version of us needed to believe it." He turned to her, pulling her close. "I can't wait to build the next part with you." She looked up at him, eyes glowing. "It starts now." "No," he whispered, kissing her forehead. "It already started." They stayed like that for a while. No music, no one watching, just the sound of the breeze through the vines and the feeling of home wrapped up in each other's arms. And when they finally drove off, Daniel behind the wheel of that same old truck, Emily resting her head on his shoulder, their rings caught the moonlight just enough to remind them they weren't starting something new. They were continuing something strong, something real, something they fought like hell for, and won. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon a few months after the wedding. Emily and Daniel were sitting in their living room, soft light coming through the windows. Old quilt draped over their legs. Claire having gone home for a bit. Everything felt peaceful. Too peaceful, Emily thought. Daniel was reading a book. Emily was sorting through mail, seeing bills and advertisements and one small envelope with a return address she didn't immediately recognize. She set it aside. Then the doorbell rang. That made both of them jump. It rarely rang. Daniel looked over and said, "You expecting someone?" Emily shook her head. She stood and walked to the door. Daniel followed more slowly. She opened it. It was Victoria. Not formal, not cold, just standing there, in a simple dress, her hair pulled back, a look in her eyes Emily didn't know how to place vulnerability, maybe, or regret. "Mum?" Emily said softly. Victoria looked at her, then looked past her into the house as if for the first time seeing it. She cleared her throat. "Can I come in?" Emily stepped aside. Victoria walked past her carefully. Daniel stood off to the side, watching, silent. They didn't hug immediately. It felt heavy, like years of walls and distance needed to shift before any arms could carefully close. Victoria walked further into the house, glancing at photos on the walls, wedding pictures, family gatherings, Claire laughing. She paused in front of a framed photo of Emily and Daniel by the vineyard. Emily came up beside her. "You're welcome anytime," she said, voice steady. Victoria nodded. "Thank you." There was a silence that stretched between them. The air felt full of words unsaid. Victoria cleared her throat. I was in the neighborhood. I wasn't sure if I should come." Emily looked down. "I wasn't sure I wanted you to." Victoria's lips quivered. "I know I did a lot of damage. More than I ever admitted. More than I even saw." Daniel came forward. "Mum," he said gently, "you don't owe her explanations." "Not if you don't want to." Victoria looked at him. She swallowed. No, I do. I'm sorry, Emily. I'm sorry for what I did to you. For the letters. For the lies. For trying to control your life like you were property of my fears. I didn't respect you. I didn't trust you. I was so afraid of losing you, I decided to destroy what I couldn't control. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She blinked, trying not to let them fall. Why now? She asked. Why come today? Victoria's voice cracked. I've had nothing but time to reflect. Nothing but silence to see what I lost. I thought maybe seeing you happy, maybe that would ease things. But it doesn't. It makes me realize just how much I missed. How much I hurt you. I don't expect forgiveness. I came because I couldn't stay away anymore. Daniel moved closer to Emily and slipped his hand into hers. Emily didn't pull away. Victoria continued. I'm not here to rebuild what I shattered overnight. I just want you to know that I see you, now really see you, and that I'm sorry. Emily's voice was soft. You're late. Victoria nodded. Yes, I know. You deserved me much earlier. There was another silence. Then Emily took a deep breath. Several things were spinning in her mind. Betrayal, hurt, wonder, longing. She looked at her mum. You want me to say this magically erases years? It doesn't. Victoria shook her head. I know it doesn't. I won't pretend it does, but I want to try. If you'll let me. Emily looked at Daniel. He squeezed her hand. She turned back to Victoria. Okay, she said. But if you break me again, you're out. Permanently. Victoria nodded, tears in her eyes. I understand. Then Emily stepped forward and hugged her. Gentle, careful. Not the hug of a girl who never hated, but the hug of a woman setting boundaries and still loving. Victoria held on, trembled, but stayed. Daniel came over and hugged them both. Part of Emily stiffened, but she let Daniel's arms close around them. They stayed like that a while. No words, just presence. Later, Victoria walked through the house. She stopped in the kitchen, paused at the shelf where Emily kept old things, letters from Claire. Her high school photo, the silver necklace she still treasured. She looked at Emily's photo with Daniel, then stepped into the backyard. Alone, she touched the gatepost where Emily had painted some initials decades ago when she was a child. She stood there, silent, letting wind move her hair. Emily followed and stood a few feet away. It's ours now, she said quietly, pointing to the initials. Victoria nodded, eyes wet. Yes, yours. They stayed out there for some time, looking out across their land, the vines, what their life had grown into. When Victoria finally spoke again, she said, Thank you for letting me in. For even this. Emily didn't answer, she just stood, then turned slowly, walked back to the house. Victoria followed, stepping lightly behind. Inside, the afternoon light was softer. The silence between them felt different now, less threatening, less full of things hidden. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. Victoria sat in the living room, flicking through old photo albums, Polaroids of Emily's childhood, of Emily and Claire, of Victoria alone. Daniel came in, sat beside Emily, and pulled her to him. She leaned her head against his chest. From the living room, Victoria's low voice floated in. You used to be so small, but I always thought I had to protect you, if I could do things over. She paused, then closed the album gently. Emily squeezed Daniel's hand. He kissed her hair. In that moment, something fragile shifted. Not fully healed, not happily ever after, but true. Morning came slow and soft at their little house. Emily woke up to sunlight spilling on her face. She blinked, felt Daniel's arm around her, warmth still lingering. She lay there a while, listening to the quiet, the kind of quiet that isn't empty, but full of possibility. She slipped from the bed carefully so she wouldn't wake him, padding across the floor to the window. Outside, dew on the grass, a few birds beginning their calls. She saw Claire's car already gone. The world was starting again. Daniel stirred behind her. You're up early, he whispered. She turned and smiled. Wanted to see how a new day looks. He stood and came over, wrapping his arms around her gently. They stayed like that for a moment. No words needed. After breakfast, they went out to the front yard. The house had a small garden. Vegetables, herbs, flowers Emily had planted with Claire while watching Daniel do small repairs around the yard. Now the garden was growing. Tomato vines climbing stakes, basil leaves thick and green, small buds forming on roses. It was proof of time, care, hope. Emily stepped between some tomato plants and plucked a small red one. She bit into it, juice warm and sweet. Taste of summer, she said. Daniel laughed. Harvested vegetables and marital bliss all in one morning. They wandered around the yard. She noticed the fence by the driveway where Daniel had patched it months ago, the place where they first said their vows in private, talking about what the future might bring. Everything felt lived in now, real. Claire dropped by in the afternoon, carrying a small box. She sat on the porch with them. "I brought something," she said. She opened the box. Inside was a framed photo, the picture from their wedding day, the one where they stood under the vine arch, hands clasped, eyes locked. It was just them, no giant backdrop, no flashy set. Claire said, "I think it belongs here." Emily cried a little, hugged Claire, then held the frame so it caught sunshine on their faces. Daniel smiled and ruffled Claire's hair. That evening they sat on the porch swing. The street was quiet. Not many cars passed. Lights in some houses flickered on. Emily leaned her head on Daniel's shoulder. He said, "We're starting small, but that's okay. Big moments don't always happen with fireworks. Sometimes they happen in quiet." She nodded. "I like quiet with you." Then she said softly, "What do you want our life to be from here?" He thought. He looked out into the yard, at the garden, at the fence. "I want routine. The kind where I come home. You're there. We talk about our day. I want to build more houses, help people fix up their homes. Use what I learned to give back." She smiled against his chest. "And I'll be here. Maybe I'll start a small shop from home. Something creative, something that's mine but also ours." He tightened his arm. That would be perfect. Later, Claire joined them with takeout dinner. They ate on the porch, mosquito netting under the eaves, soft string lights overhead. They used real plates, laughed at overcooked noodles, shared dessert even though some had spilled. Imperfect, messy, full. After dinner, Victoria walked down the street. Emily saw her first. She turned to Daniel. "I think she's coming over." They watched as Victoria approached the porch. She hesitated at the steps, then set one foot forward. Daniel and Emily stood. Claire stood too. Silence stretched. Then Victoria said, "I hope I'm not intruding." Emily replied, "You're welcome." Victoria came and stood before them. She looked tired, but something in her eyes had changed. "I've been watching. I saw the garden. I saw the photo. I saw you." She looked at Emily. "I want to try again, if you'll let me." Emily looked at Daniel. He nodded slightly. She looked back at her mother. "We're not expecting perfect. Just honesty. Just presence." Victoria nodded. "I can do that." They stood for a moment, connected like they were rebuilding something delicate. Then Emily stepped forward and hugged her gently. Daniel joined in. Claire helped pull Victoria closer. It wasn't sweeping or cinematic. It was human. Night came. The porch lights glowed. Inside the house, they cleared dishes, stacked plates, made plans for tomorrow. They talked about little things. What to plant in the garden next, which clients they would help first, who would come visit soon. Before bed, Emily and Daniel sat on the porch swing again. She told him she had dreams last night, of a house where their kids ran around, of friends gathering in their yard, of quiet Sunday mornings and late-night talks. He told her he saw all that too. Emily looked at him, eyes soft. "I'm glad this day came." He smiled. "Me too." They sat in silence, just listening. The wind in the leaves, crickets awakening, distant lights. They didn't need fireworks or grand declarations, because now they were living it. A new beginning, a life they chose again every day. They had built so much, so many promises kept. Quiet mornings, small victories, and the peace that comes when you finally feel like you belong. Emily was sleeping when Daniel woke first. He lay there, listening to her breathe, feeling her hand on his chest. He thought, "We made it." He got up, stretched quietly, and made his way to the little office he'd carved out in the corner of their living room. It was just a desk, a computer, a couple shelves of papers, and a lamp. He flicked it on and sat, opening the client folder he'd been working on. He glanced over the paperwork, started drafting an email to a contractor, and then paused. On the desk, under a stack of files, was a plain cream-colored envelope he didn't recognize. No name, no return address. He frowned, picked it up. Inside was a single sheet of paper. He unfolded it carefully. At the top was a line, "I know who he is." Under that, a name. A woman's name he didn't expect. He felt his heart skip. He read the rest. "Dear Daniel, you don't know me, but I've known you all your life. I am writing because I want to tell you a truth you never asked for, but you deserve anyway. 5 years ago, the night you left town, a woman had a secret. She was married then, and couldn't keep a child she carried because of her husband's threats and their situation. She gave birth in a clinic under a name, and someone told her later that the baby was a boy. She named him Michael. I have watched you return, watched how you love Emily, watched how you built your life, but she kept that secret. The child is yours. I tried for years to find a safe way to tell you. Now I see time is short. Today is her birthday. You deserve to know. I will disappear after this, because I can't be part of the disruption. But you need to find him. Find him before someone else does. Someone who once loved you. Daniel's head felt like it was spinning. He read it again. The child is yours. He sank into the chair. His pulse pounded. Everything he'd believed, everything he had built, quiet love, clarity, security. A crack opened beneath it. The letter was unsigned. He didn't know who to trust. Was it a prank? A lie? Or a painful truth delivered too late? He folded the paper and tucked it in his shirt. He caught his reflection in the computer monitor, his eyes wide, face pale. He needed to talk to Emily, now. In the bedroom, Emily stirred. Daniel called softly. Em, wake up. She opened her eyes. He sat on the edge of the bed, voice shaky. There's something I need to tell you. She sat up. What is it? He handed her the note. She unfolded it, read the lines, looked at him. Her eyes filled with confusion and fear. She breathed. Is it true? Daniel shook his head, unable to say yes. I don't know yet. The letter says she kept a secret 5 years ago. That she had a baby, a son named Michael, and that he's mine. Emily went still. Her face trembled. He's your son? I don't know, but I have to find out. She swallowed hard, clutching the letter. Tonight? He nodded. They drove across town to the old clinic mentioned in the note, a modest medical center that still stored old records. The building's windows were dusty, the lights dim. The door creaked as they entered. A receptionist sat behind a counter. Daniel explained calmly, I have a letter. A child born years ago. Need to access birth records under the name Michael. The receptionist frowned, asked for identification. Emily stayed close, holding his hand. After some back and forth, paperwork, and her asking questions, they were led to a records room. Dusty file cabinets lined the walls. The air smelled faintly of bleach and old paper. Daniel looked through files, years of births from the time he was gone. Emily helped. Claire's voice echoed in his head. He deserves to know. Then it happened. He found one. Michael Carter, born 6 months after Daniel left town. Mother's name coded, but father's name blank. The date matched what the letter said. He pulled the document out carefully and held it. Emily put her hand on his arm. Is this him? He turned the file so she could read. Name, date of birth, clinic, the note that father unknown. He looked up, tears in his eyes. It is. Emily's face crumpled. Oh, Daniel. I'm so sorry you had to live in the shadows of something you didn't even know existed. Daniel's voice cracked. Don't know what to feel. They left the clinic in silence, driving through the night toward clarity, toward a truth that now altered everything. At home, they sat together in the living room, the letter and the document lying between them like fragile glass. Emily reached across, took his hand. We'll find him. Together. Daniel nodded, heart pounding. The world they had built felt different now. Stretched, widened, rearranged by this twist no one saw coming. He whispered into her hand, whatever happens, I'm ready. And as dawn crept in, he held that file close, feeling the burden and the promise of this new chapter, one he never asked for, but was now determined to step into.